Hey guys, it's Zach, and I'm here with one of my first team reports, our team breakdowns. I don't know if it's necessarily a report because I haven't really taken the team to any tournaments or had any proven success with it so far, but this is my team for VGC 2020 and mainly in the doubles format for season 2 and 3. So before starting, I want to say that this is my first time doing a team report or a team breakdown, so some of the damage calcs might seem useless, or some of the damage calcs might seem weird. Let me know down in the comments what I should focus on for the next time I might do something like this. And this is also my first video recording in OBS. Obviously, this is a PowerPoint, so I'm just recording my screen to see how it goes. But if there's anything I can change or anything I can improve for the next video or the next time I use OBS, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to get some advice and see how I can get better. First off, this is the team. This is the SandLax team. So it basically has two pivot Pokemon that you can build off of. It's either the Excadrill if you want the speed, or the Snorlax if you want the Trick Room. I first started this team when I saw that Gmax was going to be allowed in VGC, which is why it started in Season 2, because in Season 1 of Ranked Online, Gigantamax Pokemon were not allowed. So I wanted to do something that was a little different than the belly drum Snorlax that everyone was seeing. But for that to be done, it needs Trick Room, really. And the Excadrill is there to have a Pokemon outside of Trick Room. Excadrill is one of the few Pokemon that excel outside of Trick Room and actually does not do well in Trick Room. So the only difference before we get started is that if you see on the picture, you can see Mimikyu has Shadow Claw, but actually it's Shadow Sneak. So if you want to try to use this team, or you want to try to build this team, make sure that you put on Shadow Sneak for priority, but we'll talk more about that when we get to Mimikyu. So next up, we're going to go to the team breakdown, and we're going to look at each individual member and talk about their pros and cons. So first off, we have our Excadrill. Excadrill is our typical Jolly Life Orb Excadrill with Mold Breaker. We go with Jolly because we want the speed over the attack. With the Life Orb, you really don't need the extra attack that an Adamant Nature would give you. And he's just a standard 252 breakdown. His moves are Drill Run, Rock Slide, Iron Head, and Swords Dance. Swords Dance doesn't get clicked too often, but if Excadrill is being ignored, it is a great time to set up, or if you have a safe entry or safe start where they're going to focus on the other Pokemon, Swords Dance is great. Rock Slide and Iron Head give you some flinch capabilities, and Drill Run does good damage against other Excadrill matchups. I have seen other Excadrills running Air Balloon to avoid the Drill Run, so keep that in mind when you're battling. So looking at some of the damage calcs, we can see that this Excadrill takes down a +1 standard Rhyperior that we're seeing online in 2 hits. It is a 64% chance to 2-hit KO. This Excadrill Iron Head has a 37% chance to OHKO a bulky Togekiss without any boost. So if you're starting off the match and they start off with Togekiss, you can land an Iron Head and almost definitely OHKO it, and that is basically a 60% chance when it comes to a Max Steel Spike, because the attack is boosted greatly and Life Orb is still in there. And if you can get the chance to hit Hatterene without Follow Me or before setting Trick Room, it's a good chance to OHKO with Iron Head every single time. The issue with that is getting to actually hit Hatterene before Trick Room goes up. So if you want to keep it late game after Trick Room's over, after the redirect is gone, that could be a strategy, but usually Excadrill is one of the starting few. But we'll move on to Tyranitar. Tyranitar is one of those Pokemon that can work well in either of these modes, but this is a weakness policy Tyranitar with Sandstream. The Sandstream does good to give it a defensive boost and give Excadrill that well-needed defensive boost. And this is a more bulkier set than what most people are saying. A lot of people are seeing the Tyranitars that are using weakness policy but have 252 attack. That's not the case with this one. A lot of this Tyranitar is to deal with type coverage that the Excadrill cannot handle or other Pokemon on the team cannot handle, and that's where you see the Crunch and the Rock Slide and the Ice Punch. Crunch and Rock Slide are the stab moves that are going to get a defense drops, are going to get flinch, and Ice Punch is there to counter dragons like Goodra and Flygon, and I've seen a few Flygons, and Flygon and Dragapult, but most of the time you're going to pick Crunch over Ice Punch if you're facing a Dragapult. So some of those damage specs, as you can see below, this is a 3-hit KO against a choice spec Dragapult Draco's Meteor. And as you know, Draco Meteor, every time you use it, the special attack is going to drop, so it's going to get weaker and weaker. And then Crunch has a 43% chance to OHKO it back without weakness policy. And I believe with weakness policy that that's basically a guaranteed OHKO once weakness policy is prompted. So if you're going up against Dragapult, you can take a hit and still be able to fire back and almost knock it out every single time. This Tyranitar also lives a Life Orb Charizard Max Overgrowth. It is a 21% chance to hit KO. So one of the big things about Charizard is his damage output. So having this Pokemon that could fire a Rock Slide back at that Charizard and take the damage from it is very important when facing Charizards. And this Tyranitar also takes a 2-hit KO from Galarian Darmanitan's Max Hailstorm. So this Tyranitar is really built on bulk, and the weakness policy is there to give it a boost if it is staying in the match long enough to actually make some impact. But most of the time it's just type coverage, Rock Slide, set sand for Excadrill. Next, we have our Rotom-Wash. So this Rotom-Wash actually does really well with either mode of the team. It is one of the faster ones of the team, but when comparing it to most Rotom-Washes that we're seeing, it's not that fast. It has Hydro Pump, Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, and Will-O-Wisp. The Will-O-Wisp is there to burn offensive threats. The Hydro Pump, the Volt Switch, the Thunderbolt is there to take away those fire types, and the flying, the Corviknight we see, does lots of damage to Corviknight. So Rotom-Wash's Thunderbolt takes out a max HP, max special defense Corviknight. It's a 2-hit KO chance with leftovers. So a lot of those Corviknights are boosting though, so that's without boost, so you do have to keep that in mind. The Sitrus Berry is there to keep the Rotom around a little longer. And then this Rotom-Wash's Hydro Pump will also guarantee a G-Max Charizard, guarantee an OHKO on that G-Max Charizard outside of Sun being set. So as long as you have a clear battlefield, or if you have the rain, you should be able to OHKO it. The issue there with going against a Charizard is being able to outspeed it. So you might have to paralyze it or set Trick Room before you send in Rotom against a Charizard of that type. Next up we have Scrafty, and Scrafty is definitely the niche one of the group. So when I looked at Scrafty, I wanted a Pokemon that would be able to take away some of the common meta strategies that we were seeing in Season 1. This team was planned and created during Season 1, but I wasn't able to bring it until Season 2. So this is a Scrafty with Intimidate, Adamant Nature, and as you can see, there is a lot put into attack, but it's gotten a pretty even spread of HP, defense, and special defense with a little bit of speed. So I ended up making sure that it could outspeed other Scrafties to get a fake out off on them. A lot of the Scrafties that you see are given maybe like 90 speed are less, or even none at all. They're just focused on the HP and the defense. So Scrafty is kind of a glass cannon. So I get the speed to get the fake out a little quicker. Its moves are Brick Break, Thief, Poison Jab, and Fake Out. So Fake Out is there to help set the conditions of Trick Room in a lot of matches. Brick Break is there to counter Grimmsnarl screens. So when Grimmsnarl sets screens, once you set the Trick Room, you can Brick Break and get a little chip on it, but also take down those screens. Keeping those screens down can be very important in a longer game that you see when Trick Room is set. Thief is definitely the utility of this Scrafty. As you can see, the Scrafty does not have an item, and that's because we're kind of using Thief to our advantage. And Thief is really used to dismantle Pokemon that need certain items to function well. For example, if I came off turn 1 against a Snorlax that I knew was G-Max, I would Thief the berry rather than to Fake Out, because once you take away that Snorlax's berry, it cannot recover it with G-Max Replenish. I have also used it to take away choice specs away from Pokemon. I've used it to take away berries from other Pokemon like Rotom that are Corviknight, take away leftovers from Corviknight. I've also actually used it to snatch weakness policy from Rhyperiors before they're able to prompt it. So if they come out turn 1 with a Dusclops and Rhyperior, if the Rhyperior doesn't protect, you can get a Thief off and take its weakness policy before the Dusclops can set Trick Room or do a Bulldozer on it. Poison Jab is there to deal with those fairy Pokemon, so once Trick Room's set, Scrafty does stand a little bit of chance against most fairies. When it's out of Trick Room, Scrafty is basically going down to any fairy move that isn't like a pixelated quick attack. It goes down to Togekiss's Dazzling Gleam. It goes down to Moonblast. But if you can Fake Out a Whimsicott turn 1 and set the Trick Room, you're guaranteed to knock out on that Whimsicott with Poison Jab afterwards. I didn't put that in the damage calcs because I didn't think it was necessary to say that Whimsicott goes down to a Poison Jab from Scrafty. But looking at the damage calcs, you can see that Scrafty's Poison Jab does get a 3-hit KO on a bulky Togekiss. So you can actually double into that Togekiss to put a lot of pressure on it. And if it is a 0 HP, 4 defense, if it's one of those quicker attacking Togekisses that we saw a little earlier in the first season, it's a 98% chance to hit KO. But once again, if you're coming against a Togekiss, you are probably doubling into it to get it off the field as quick as possible. That Poison Jab also, is that the same one? I believe that might be the same. That is the exact same damage calc as you see on the second set. Okay, so once again, the faster Togekisses go down in 2 shots from a Scrafty. A Scrafty's Brick Break, it can also do about almost 40% damage on a solid rock Rhyperior. So getting that chip, that solid chip on Rhyperior is very important to taking it down. So Scrafty is more of a utility Pokemon that's doing chip rather than getting guaranteed knockouts, except for a chipped Whimsicott. Moving on to the next one, we have Mimikyu. Mimikyu is our Trick Room Pokemon. So Mimikyu has leftovers because I really couldn't think of any other item that it would take advantage of. And when Mimikyu's on the field, it's often ignored. So leftovers helps it get a little bit of recovery if sand is set, or if it has its disguise broken and it's lost that 1/8 of health. Mimikyu is just a bulkier variant. The only boost that you get to attack is from its Adamant Nature, and it has Trick Room, Shadow Sneak, Playlet Rough, and Destiny Bond. So Mimikyu's real setup is it's only there to really set up Trick Room and then kind of give it support while it lasts. Mimikyu's Play Rough does hit a Dragapult with a guaranteed 2-hit KO. Most of the time, if you can get some solid chip on it, you can easily get the knockout. So Shadow Sneak also does very good damage against Dusclops, against Dragapult. So once again, kind of like Scrafty, it's really there just as a utility, and then to set some chip for the other main attackers. Mimikyu's biggest thing is going against a Mold Breaker Excadrill turn 1. If the Excadrill is not a Mold Breaker, then you are honestly good to set Trick Room, and you actually have a really good setup against a lot of Steel-type Pokemon. One thing I like to do is, you see that Destiny Bond at the bottom, so turn 1, I'll Trick Room, and if they break the disguise and don't knock me out, if it's like a Corviknight or an Excadrill, they're going to use those Pokemon to get an easy knockout on Mimikyu turn 2. So that's when I set the Destiny Bond, and I can take out a Corviknight, I can take out a Duraludon, I can take out a Corviknight with by them flash canning or Iron Head against this Mimikyu, because it set up Destiny Bond. The only time this does not work is if that Pokemon is Gigantamaxed or Dynamaxed. So keep that in mind when setting the Destiny Bond. And also, one thing I like to do, if Mimikyu does stay in for the long term of the game, I will set Destiny Bond on the last turn of Trick Room, which will give me the opportunity to set Trick Room again, because you either have to take out that Mimikyu and lose a Pokemon to Destiny Bond, or you're going to let it set up the Trick Room again. And most people actually just will avoid it and let it set up the Trick Room again. So our final one we have is Snorlax, and Snorlax is our G-Max Pokemon of the team. As you can see, G-Max Snorlax has Gluttony. It has the Ipapa Berry to get recovery. It is a level 50 Brave Nature, so that takes away the speed, and that adds into the attack. So it's a standard bulky set with a decent amount into attack. I do have 8 IVs on speed, because that was the lowest speed Gluttony Snorlax I was able to get from max raids. The moves I have are Facade, Darkest Liart, Protect, and Curse. So I saw a lot of people, when they saw G-Max Snorlax, they wanted to run Belly Drum and either do a Hyper Speed with Tailwind Snorlax, or set Trick Room and sweep Snorlax. I really didn't like how easy it was to counter the Belly Drum, so I figured that with Facade and Darkest Liart and Curse, if I can get Snorlax in early on the Trick Room, I can Curse 1 or 2 times and get a +1 in attack and defense, and just guarantee that lower speed. Once Snorlax gets the defense buffs, it can take hits anyway, and you want Snorlax to be able to get some hits in so it can recover its berry if it needs to. And I try not to Dynamax or Gigantamax Snorlax until after I've propped the first berry, unless it's being immediately threatened by something like a Rhyperior. So the Darkest Liart can hit a lot of Pokemon that they would normally switch in on a Snorlax. If you're worried about Ghost Pokemon on the Ghost switch, you can just use a Max Darkness and take out that Pokemon. So looking at some damage calcs, you can see that this Snorlax takes at least 1 Max Knuckle from Rhyperior. It's a guaranteed 2-hit KO, but that does not factor in the berry recovery, and if Snorlax finds its berry again in Trick Room. This Snorlax also does a good 25 to 28% damage on Corviknight, which sounds really terrible, but when you think about how Corviknight can be shut down easily by a Rotom's Thunderbolt, taking about 50 to 60%, the extra 25 to 30% is not bad. Its Facade after it's burnt is also taking out around the same amount. So if the Snorlax is burnt, you can use Facade over the G-Max Replenish. The only thing you want to watch out for is if Corviknight is on the field, the max darkness will drop its special defense, which it will mirror back onto you, and Snorlax losing any form of defense is really not good for its longevity. But once you lose your Dynamax, you can Darkest Liart onto that Corviknight a little more safely and hit it for neutral damage, and get some good chip on it. And the Darkest Liart also takes out a choice spec, a choice Dragapult or a 252 Dragapult almost every single time with a guaranteed 2-hit KO. And if you max Darkness, you're basically guaranteed the knockout. So that is the members of the team so far. That is my original team that I started with. This is the original team that I planned. I originally thought about switching out Mimikyu for Gardevoir, but Mimikyu's Ghost type did a lot better defensively against the meta so far, where Gardevoir kind of takes more hits easily. But let's look at our possible leads. So my first lead is, of course, the Sand lead, and that's when people look at you in team previews, people see that Excadrill and Tyranitar on the top, and they think that you're immediately going Sand. So not a lot of people are expecting the Trick Room, which I have kept in the bottom of my team preview. So you can go Excadrill, Tyranitar, you can max Excadrill and use Tyranitar to support. So some of the pros of this is that Sand adds bulk to both of these Pokemon. Excadrill really needs the bulk, especially with Life Orb damage and it being mostly dedicated to speed and special attack. Excadrill hits hard and hits fast, so if you are not wanting to set up Trick Room, if their Trick Room is better than yours, you can just hit hard and hit fast and hope that you can either flinch or take out the Trick Room setter before it happens. And one of the negatives is that you really have to keep Excadrill safe. Tyranitar is bulky enough where it can really hold its own, but Excadrill itself needs more support when Dynamaxing, and that's where Tyranitar comes in for the Ice Punch, for Dragon support, against grass Pokemon, the Rock Slide flinches, the Crunch special defense drops. These are all things that are there to not only do decent damage, but also support Excadrill. My next lead is the Trick Room lead, and that is Snorlax and Mimikyu. So turn 1, I would usually curse or protect Snorlax to start boosting that Snorlax, and then I would Trick Room with Mimikyu. Some of the pros is that you get Snorlax setting up early. You don't have to wait to switch Snorlax in. You get more time to get some more curses. You do take more damage doing this, but if the team isn't doing anything too hyper offensive, you can get in some good boosts while Trick Room is being set. Some of the negatives is when you see Snorlax and Mimikyu come out, the Trick Room becomes very predictable. And with this, there's really nothing protecting either of these Mons. Like Snorlax does have Protect, but if Mimikyu is going for Trick Room, it's going to go last, and it's very vulnerable to a double up. And Snorlax is vulnerable to a double up if it is going against a Rhyperior or something that has Max Knuckle, getting good damage on it before it can get a Curse Boost or before it can get Trick Room. So when looking at this, one change I definitely made that helped me get into the Master Ball tiers a lot faster when I first started this team, starting out at tier 4, I believe. I started out at Great Ball tier. Was opting in for that Scrafty lead instead of Snorlax. So Snorlax can come in on Trick Room, and once it gets its boost, once it gets its bulk, once it does some damage, it really only needs 3 turns of Trick Room. If you can get 4 turns of Trick Room, if you can get Scrafty to get knocked out quickly, you can have Snorlax get a Curse Boost and lower that speed, guarantee it to move even faster the next turn in Trick Room, give it that +1 defense, give it that +1 attack that's going to deal a lot of damage. But Scrafty's support, you can put Scrafty in instead of T-Tar and give some fake out support for Excadrill. You can either use that to Swords Dance, you can use that to Rock Slide and get some flinches off. The fake out support, you can Thief with Scrafty to take out important items. And like I said before, Poison Jab wipes out Whimsicott after a fake out chip at all. Any damage on a Whimsicott, Poison Jab is going to take it out. And then you can also put Scrafty in instead of Snorlax to get a safer Trick Room up. And like I said, if they lead with the Whimsicott, if they lead with the Togekiss, you can immediately start threatening it with Poison Jab, and then the Thief can also take away important items. Can take away important items before Snorlax gets on the field. So it can take away leftovers from Corviknight to stall out Snorlax. It can take away weakness policy from Rhyperior to keep its damage output down. Some of the pros, like I said, Trick Room is a lot easier to set up. Fake Out Chip is good. Thief can take items like Assault Vest, Weakness Policy, and Life Orb. The cons to this is Scrafty dies to anything Fairy. As I stated before, when it comes to a Fairy matchup, Scrafty is not the Pokemon to have in your corner. One thing I do like about the Scrafty is that I've seen the G-Max Pikachu lead, just spreading paralysis and getting some paralysis hacks, and you can really neuter Pikachu's damage output by thiefing that that light ball from Pikachu. So once you take that light ball from Pikachu, its damage output is nothing. So Scrafty doesn't have knockout, so that's where I originally wanted him to be in my team as a knockoff user, but since I didn't have that, I wanted to try Thief, and so far it's been working out okay. So now looking at the team comps, the team builds, this is the usual team setup that you take when going into a battle. So one of them is Excadrill, Tyranitar, Rotom-Wash, and Scrafty. So you either go stand lead or you go Excadrill with fake out support. So Scrafty's Intimidate and Rotom's Will-O-Wisp will decrease damage output of the opposing team. Max Quake and Max Steel Spike, it increases defense on the team all around, which is good for this team. The whole team needs special defense and defense boosts except for Rotom. Rotom can do pretty well. Possible Dynamax for all Pokemon but Scrafty. So when you have this team, you can Dynamax Excadrill, you can Dynamax Tyranitar, you can Dynamax Rotom if you're going against a G-Max Charizard, and all these Pokemon do have enough damage output to threaten opposing Pokemon with KOs if you have a good team setup. With this team comp, one thing you need to watch out for is Gastrodon. Rotom usually sits in the back and comes in afterwards because you usually lead Excadrill and Scrafty or Excadrill and Tyranitar. So Rotom usually sits in the back, and if you get a one-on-one with a Rotom-Wash and a Gastrodon, you're going to have a bad time. You really are. You also have to watch out for Trick Room, especially in DDF and Hatterene, because it's really hard to avoid that Trick Room getting set up, and Hatterene is going to knock out the Excadrill that next turn with a Max Flare or Mystical Fire. Usually when that happens, if I know that team is coming out, I will choose to Dynamax Tyranitar and get a Max Darkness and a Rock Slide to try to flinch and then do lots of damage on that NDD. And then another thing you need to watch out for is heavy fire usage. So Excadrill does not do good against fire. He's the main lead of this team, so if he goes down to a turn 1 fire, whether it's from a Max Flare or a Flamethrower or a Mystical Fire, if you lose him early in the match without getting a knockout or a good chip, it's not going to be a good rest of the match. So let's take a look at the next team comp. So the next team comp is a combination of Mimikyu, Snorlax, Scrafty, Rotom-Wash, and Tyranitar. So this team definitely has a lot more options. Basically, anyone can come based on the type matchup that you need, except for Excadrill. I usually don't bring Excadrill if I'm setting Trick Room, and that's just because he has good damage output, but he's always going to be going last, so he's going to get targeted down quickly. So my strategy with this is to Trick Room with Curse-Lax or Fake Out support. Intimidate, Fake Out, Thief, Brick Break can help against popular strategies, as I stated before, Whimsicott, Grimmsnarf screens. You can Thief Snorlax's berries, you can thief weakness policy, you can thief assault vest, you can thief Eviolite, and in most cases Scrafty really benefits from Assault Vest. It can use berries that it snatches. Really, the only thing that it's not going to benefit from is Evolite, maybe a spec. If you steal like a choice spec or a choice scarf, it's not going to benefit from that, especially in Trick Room. And then weakness policy, because really anything Scrafty's getting hit with that it has a weakness to, it's probably going down to. So next up we have Rotom-Wash. Rotom-Wash pairs well with Gmax Snorlax. They both have berries, so they can both get berry recovery. And you can also use Rotom's Will-O-Wisp to minimize the damage output of teams attacking Snorlax, which just gives Snorlax more longevity and more chances to recover those berries. I've definitely had a time where I've been in endgame with just Snorlax and Rotom. Trick Rooms end it, but Rotom's taking hits, Snorlax is taking hits, and then Snorlax is getting both their berries back. Curselax can boost before after Dynamax, and that's one thing I really like about Curse over Belly Drum, is you can use the Curse whenever necessary. So if you know that a set or a team is going to ignore that Snorlax for a turn and maybe focus on the Tyranitar or focus on the Mimikyu to keep Trick Room from coming up again, you can start cursing and get those boosts. With Belly Drum, you basically get one Belly Drum, and you either need to keep Recycle or you need to hope for the Gmax Replenish, which out of Gigantamax, that's a little harder for Snorlax to do unless you're taking away a Protect or move for Recycle. Also, Darkest Liart ignores most boost, so if a Corviknight is trying to boost in your face, you can wait until Dynamax is over, kind of ignore it, just kind of take away its damage output, and then you can either burn it with Rotom, or you can start just like Thunderbolting it. And then last off, Tyranitar's natural bulk and sand lets it become dangerous, especially with its weakness policy. So a lot of times Tyranitar is hitting second or third, and there's been a lot of times where it's taken a little bit of chip, but enough chip to activate its weakness policy, and then it hits a big rock slide. It has just so much good natural bulk that it comes in. Because this team is bulky and it has a lot of berries, Mimikyu having leftovers, sand really doesn't do that much damage. If you have sand on your side and sand isn't on the other side, you can really have an advantage there just by setting sand and getting that chip on Pokemon you needed to, like Whimsicott or any other Focus Sash Pokemon. I've even turned in sand because I knew I was going to prop in a Focus Sash, and I've switched in Tyranitar just to set that sand and just to get that chip on that Pokemon that was going to live on one. Some things to watch out for with this team build is Gastrodon. It's not as bad as the first team's danger to it, but it's still something to watch out for. It's really something that when Gastrodon hits the field, it's something that you need to target extremely and quickly. You don't want it to get any defense boosts. You don't want it to start getting recoveries. You don't want it to land toxic on these Pokemon because they're built very defensively. So poison chips down at that defense, and you don't want that to happen. Another thing you need to watch out for is dedicated Trick Rooms. So this team has a Trick Room mode, but it's definitely not a dedicated Trick Room. So looking at that, if you have a Dusclops, Rhyperior, Torkoal, Butterfree, those are the teams you need to watch out for. Those are the teams where you might want to opt to go fast rather than to Trick Room with the Sand lead, because once Snorlax gets knocked out, and they're going to target the Snorlax, a lot of the other Pokemon like Scrafty, like Rotom-Wash, like Tyranitar, they do well in Trick Room, but they can't keep up with Trick Room dedicated teams. Mold Breaker, Mons before Trick Room. So one thing you need to watch out for is turn 1 Mold Breaker Excadrill going against Mimikyu, because it will ignore Mimikyu's disguise and it can most of the time go straight for the KO. That's where Scrafty's Intimidate and Fake Out support comes in. Most of the time you just have to hope that the Fake Out is enough, because not the Fake Out, you need to hope that the Intimidate's enough, because the Fake Out is usually not going to land on the Excadrill, because the Excadrill most of the time is going to be that Pokemon Dynamaxing. And another thing I wanted to talk about with Scrafty that I forgot about is when you're leading at turn 1, you really have to make sure that you are making good predictions on which Pokemon is going to Dynamax or Gigantamax, because Fake Out does not work on Dynamax or Gigantamax Pokemon. So if you Fake Out a Charizard and a Charizard Whimsicott lead, you're probably going to be in for a bad time, because that Charizard is going to Dynamax and still get its attack off. So in cases like that, you actually want to think which Pokemon is less likely to Gigantamax or Dynamax, and you want to Fake Out that one just to give your team some support. Like I said, if you're not being threatened by a Mold Breaker Pokemon, Mimikyu is going to get that Trick Room set up, as long as it's not doubled. So moving back over to troubled Pokemon, so I've talked a lot about Gastrodon, and my other team leads are any other Pokemon with Water Reserve, really. This can completely wall Rotom-Wash. Rotom is usually kept in the back, so that makes Gastrodon very dangerous for a endgame team. Even Burn doesn't do much, because Gastrodon has a lot of recovery options, and it's going to be able to hit you. A lot of my team doesn't do well to fighting types, so Conkeldurr and Rhyperior, who carry a good amount of Max Knuckle, Hammer Arm moves, is dangerous, but Conkeldurr is especially dangerous because it has solid type matchups against Excadrill, Tyranitar, Snorlax, and Scrafty, which is 4-6, more than half of my team. Guts boosts it with priority. Mach Punch will have priority in and out of Trick Room, so you always have to worry about Conkeldurr doing damage no matter what when it's on the field. Drain Punch can cause a problem when it's attacking, because it's going to get that recovery off of the team. So Conkeldurr can definitely be a challenge if Mimikyu or Rotom are already gone. Mimikyu's Play Rough will take care of a Conkeldurr very easily, and Rotom's Hydro Pump will take care of it, and you can also burn it. If it's Iron Fist, I wouldn't recommend burning it if it was Guts and it hasn't set the burn itself. But the Hydro Pump and Play Rough should take out a Conkeldurr, but you still need to be careful of its priority Mach Punch and Drain Punch when Mons like Tyranitar, Excadrill, and Snorlax are on the field. Another trouble for this team is definitely Redirect and Sleep Powder. I think this is just something that everyone has a problem with right now. It's kind of hard to avoid it. If you see a Butterfree, you can always go you can go maybe like Excadrill Rotom and get the Electric Terrain to avoid the Sleep Powder, or you can go Scrafty and Fake Out the Butterfree and set the Electric Terrain. That's really the only way you can avoid sleep. But then there's Mons like Bulky Togekiss, which can take some shots from Excadrill, can take some shots from Scrafty's Poison Jab, and then Indeedee-F. Indeedee-F is very bulky, and it just takes a lot of damage. So these Pokemon are usually there to help another Pokemon set up or help get up Trick Room. So these could be a problem Pokemon. And then, as I've said before, dedicated Trick Rooms. So if their Trick Room beats you, if you can see it on Team Preview, if you see that Dusclops, if you see that Mudsdale, if you see that Rhyperior, that Torkoal, the Gastrodon, Pokemon that are built dedicated for Trick Room, your best bet is to go Excadrill and T-Tar and hope that you get some Rock-Slide flinches. Or you can Max Darkness the Dusclops. But other than that, it's going to be a challenge when going against a hard Trick Room team, because this team has a Trick Room option, but it's not a dedicated Trick Room team. So one of the next things I wanted to look at is where to improve this team. So obviously I've been using this team since Season 2, so I've been using this team for almost 2 months now, and it's gotten me to Master Ball both times, but I'm looking to see what I can do better or what I can do differently. So my first thought is to replace Mimikyu for Dusclops. So Dusclops has really risen up as a good Trick Room Pokemon because it's just so bulky with its Eviolite. Some of the pros is that it's more bulky. It's easier to set Trick Room because you don't have to worry about Mold Breaker. And Ally Switch is the worst. So it has Ally Switch, it has Will-O-Wisp, it has Trick Room. You can put Bulldoze on it, and you can get good support from Dusclops. But that's about it. Some of the cons are no fairy move, so I would lose out on a lot of dragon matchups unless I brought Tyranitar, and even then, its Ice Punch is usually not enough to hit like bulkier dragons. No Destiny Bond. Destiny Bond actually does really good against Steel type Pokemon, especially ones that are just like, oh, they set Trick Room, but I'm gonna hit Mimikyu, and it's just like, well, you're gonna hit Mimikyu, but you're also gonna go down. And then you also get no priority with Dusclops, where Mimikyu gets Shadow Sneak, which has definitely set some good chip against mons that I might know are Focus Sash, or like ones that are just need that little like chip before like Mimikyu goes out or before Snorlax makes a move. My next replacement or my next change I thought about making is replacing Scrafty for Braviary. One of the pros is that um, knockoff knockoff would be switch for Thief, so I believe Braviary gets access to knockoff still, where Scrafty does not, which makes no sense. Give Scrafty back knockoff. Um, I can have an item if I'm not depending on the thief mechanic to steal items from other Pokemon. Then I could have an item myself on the Braviary, which could give it more longevity. It's more reliable damage output. So I would have a stronger Mon to hit harder. It gets a Tailwind option for when I don't want to bring Trick Room. And then it's an extra choice for Dynamax. So Scrafty really doesn't Dynamax too well. He doesn't have a lot of options and a lot of choices. And the damage output of Dynamax Scrafty is not really worth it. Where Braviary can do well when Dynamax. So some of the cons is that I lose Intimidate. Yeah, you get Defiant, but Intimidate is really good with minimizing the damage output of opposing teams. I would lose Fake Out, and then I would also lose Poison Jab for my Fairy matchup. So Fairy can hit Tyranitar decently. It wipes out Scrafty, so you need that Poison Jab to do big damage in Trick Room before those faster fairies like Whimsicott, like Togekiss get a chance to move. Sylveon as well. I should have calced for Sylveon now that I think about it. But putting in Braviary in place of Scrafty, I lose out on that Poison Jab, so I lose out on a lot of Fairy matchups, and this is where the changes are kind of holding me back. Losing out on Fairy moves and Poison moves are definitely, they're needed in the metagame. Fairy is a big opponent in the metagame. Dragon is a big opponent in the metagame. As you know, the Excadrill Togekiss Dragapult lead is very popular, that team core. So I would lose big answers to that team core, especially in Trick Room. So I've definitely had a lot of matches where Mimikyu and Scrafty itself have enough damage output to take care of the first half of the team, just after turn one of setting up Trick Room with taking out a Whimsicott and using a Play Rough and dropping the attack, and it definitely does well. I can't see myself making changes right now, but these are definitely possible options if I were to make changes to this team. Next up, try the team out. If you want to try the team out, here is the code. I did make it public. As you can see, Scrafty has no item. This Mimikyu does have Shadow Sneak and not Shadow Claw. So if you want to try it out, you can try it out and let me know. And next, I want to say thanks to some of my sources. I got the images and information from Cerebi.net. It's really the best place to go if you're on a computer, and even if you're on your phone. Cerebi is one of the best places to get information. thank you, Smogon, for some information on the movesets. I did grab some of my spreads, base my ideas off how much I want it for bulk for Rotom-Wash and Snorlax off of older, bulkier sets that haven't been used in this metagame yet. And then I also used their damage calculator, of course, for doing some damage output. And thank you, DataDex, which is an app that I have done a video on. I will have a link in the description for that. But it does have a team builder for the paid version of the app, which gives you type relations. So it tells you what types your team is weak to, what types your team is strong to, which is really good when planning a team. And it also gives you a move type coverage chart. So it will list, hey, you're missing a move to hit flying types. So that's where I looked at finding Rotom-Wash because it hit fire and it hit flying. Oh, you don't have an ice move. You need to hit dragon and you need to hit this. And it's like, all right, well, Tyranitar can have ice punch. And that coverage chart did lead to a lot of my weirder choices in my movesets, especially in Tyranitar and in Scrafty. Like, I picked the big Brick Break to deal with the screens, the Poison Jab to deal with the Fairy. I wouldn't have seen those weaknesses if it wasn't for DataDex's type coverage chart and their team builder. But anyways, what did you think? I feel like I've been rambling on for quite a while, but let me know down in the comments below what you think of my team. What did you think about the video? How can I improve a video like this for next time? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I know this is a very long video, so if you've made it to the end, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.